everyone. Welcome to HR Therapy. Are there people here? Can you hear me now? This is like, do you guys remember that old 2000s commercial? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? What about now? I reference that commercial quite regularly. Okay, well, if you are here and in the chat, you can go ahead and answer this question. If you had to give your HR tech a relationship status, I don't know why I went with this, would it be thriving, it's complicated, or on life support? Let's see what people say. Can people not chat us? I don't see anyone chatting in the chat.
Chat is disabled.
The chat is disabled. Hold on, let's see. I can get my team to fix this real quick. We will fix the chat thing. Everyone bear with us. Give us 1 second. Okay, well, in the meantime, how about this? We'll come back to that question until we get chat fixed because the chat is, oh, there it is.
Oh,
Oh my God, that was so scary for a second. Yes, okay, because this is the best part of HR therapy. People want to talk to each other. Remember, if the down caret says host and panelists, you're only talking to me and these wonderful panelists, but you should hit everybody. Oh, everyone got with it real quick. Life support in all caps. Jesse, we got to talk. Wow, we got another life support. It's complicated with the That's what I would say, actually.
same.
Okay. Wow, no one's saying thriving. I'm really worried for all of us. That's probably why everyone came to this event. Whoever said non-existent, we'll maybe get to the bottom of that today. Oh, our first Friday. Well, thriving. By the way, remember, make sure your down caret is set to everyone, not to just hosts and panelists. But somebody did. Wow, we had an abusive one. I'm so sorry. Complicated moving to life support. Another thriving.
I'm just gonna shout out that Rachel's like, and it's all because of me. Like, we love a strong queen.
And it's all because of me. Love that. Somewhere between it's thriving and it's complicated. Okay, we're gonna get to the root of where we are with our tech today. No, you're fine. Okay, everyone's in the chat. If you haven't been here before at HR Therapy, welcome. We're going to talk about tech stack therapy. Instead of just HR therapy, we're really going to get into our tools, why we use them, and why they sometimes hold us hostage in ways I would not recommend. So what we're going to do today, you're going to meet these lovely people that are here. We're going to do a segment called Dear Hib and Friends where we answer questions. We're going to take your questions in the live Q&A. Remember to go in and drop them. In the little Zoom bar, there's like a button that says Q&A. I think you just press that and you put your question and you can upvote it. So that's the really important part. If you really passionately want your question answered or others answered, you can definitely upvote. And then we'll wrap with a what's next. But before we get to all of that, just a heads up, this is being recorded. None of your information is being stored anywhere. The chat is very distracting. So if you want to make friends and talk to people, the chat is where you should be. If you get distracted very easily, you should minimize that right now. And in the last 20 minutes, we will aim to take all of your live questions. Okay, now who are we and what are we doing here? We're going to start some introductions. Ken.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ken Machus. I'm the Director of Marketing Insights at HiBob. I'm an organizational psychologist by training, and I've spent the last almost 2 decades focused on everything from racial and ethnic harassment and discrimination to the military, to employee engagement, to building more flexible experiences. Now I focus on helping HiBob understand what's going on in the HR tech and experience market and help them help you better.
You're my data guy. You know, like everything. I love having convos with Ken because he's always like, well, there's a statistic that, and I'm like, wow, Ken, thank you. And then I write it down. I'm like, I will be using this later. Thank you, Ken. I'm so excited you're here. Paula.
Hey, my name is Paula Tett. I am a head of people at Fuel Cycle. We're a SaaS-based market research company based in Los Angeles and New York. I have led people and culture strategies at a variety of organizations, typically small to mid-size, and really focused around, growth, building performance-driven workplaces, and people-first environments. I'm really excited about the topic today. It's a topic near and dear to my heart, and just really leveraging how we can use technology better to create better employee experiences at the end of the day and fuel that.
And Paula, I dropped the L from Fuel Cycle as your company name. I'm so sorry. That must have been my typo this morning.
Oh yeah, no worries.
Love it. I just saw it, and I'm always like really big on my typos because I make terrible ones. So I had to like call myself out on that. So I'm so sorry. But thank you for being here today, and I can't wait to get to some of the stuff we're talking about. And finally, Ryan May.
Hi, I'm Rainey McAvoy. I am the Vice President of People Operations for Blackthorn.io. We are a SaaS company in the Salesforce space. I have also been in Safe Space for a few years now, and I am the HR person who buys tech, tells them I'm not going to use it in the way they tell me to, and then get mad at them when it doesn't work how I wanted, which is I think why Heba tapped me, because I'm infamous for being like, no, I wanted to do this, like it doesn't do that. And then 6 months later, I'm like, yeah, it's not doing the thing I wanted that you told me it wouldn't. Now I'm just mad. So I'm assuming that's why I was invited to this conversation.
Because you have opinions on things, Ryan May. That's why you were invited. That's why everyone always comes to HR therapy. Okay. And finally, me. If you do not know me, I'm Hibba Yusuf. I'm the Chief People Officer at Workweek. I also founder and created I Hate It Here, the newsletter podcast all about how to make work better. I am also notoriously mean to sales teams as well, to the point where I will demand that they give me a sandbox to test everything in. And then I just tend to get mad and then ask if I can submit feature requests for the things that I want. So like the difference is I don't get mad that I can't do it. I just then ask them, hey, can I contribute to your product roadmap? And then they're like, no, stop. We have a product roadmap that we built we're not asking for your feedback. So I also deeply care about this topic and I can't wait to get into it today. So now without further ado, our dear Hiba Ken Paula Ryan May. Say that 5 times fast. I want to start with like the area where things can go wrong fast. So my first question for the group is, where's one area where if you have the wrong tool, things can actually get complicated really fast?
I think we all know the answer to this, but I'll take the lead here. Definitely payroll, taxes, compliance, those things nightmarish, especially if you're operating in multiple states, globally, or anywhere in between, because even one state can go horribly wrong if that's the problem. I think I'll just kind of segue to around, what are some symptoms that might hold you back with your tech stack? And I think the symptoms, like if you can check yes to any of these, like you're doing a lot of workarounds, you're trying to export data into spreadsheets, and wondering why you're spending hours trying to get a very simple answer that like technology should hopefully help you solve. Lots of manual work, poor or incomplete vendor support. I could go on, but I'll stop there.
We'll definitely get into all those too. I feel like that's going to come up so often in this conversation, but payroll is the bane of my existence, but I will stop there. Ryan or Ken, anything to add where things can get complicated real fast?
I always think of the core HR system where everything else is feeding off of that. And so, well, like payroll will reveal that it's effed up really fast. That core system will just be this insidious thread of problems that just infects everything. I mean, I can't count the number of times I have gone to someone and said, hey, this field is supposed to be all numbers. Why are there letters in it? That your system even allows you to do that is like mind blowing. And so I think if you don't have a really good core data system that everything else is leaning on, that like has good guardrails and adapts to what you really need it to be, you're setting yourselves up for a bunch of hidden little discoveries.
Yeah, I also think when it comes to like my worst Slack I've ever gotten, and unfortunately I've gotten it multiple times in my career, is somebody slacking me that like their pay was incorrect. And so I'm always like, that is the most embarrassing thing as an HR person. Second, like that's like how you lose trust so fast. And I don't like to mess with people's like income. That's just not okay. And at the time, I actually didn't even own payroll the first time this happened to me. So I was like, how do I even reply to this? Like, I don't even own payroll. I couldn't have even done anything other than tell the person that this thing had to happen. But it's also the part that I think like employees feel the first and I get the most embarrassed about. But the flip side of it too is that like it's so complicated. Like everyone instantly said payroll. And I think about that so often because it is so complicated and people's entire jobs are payroll and everyone seems to think like I just press a button and everyone gets paid and it all perfectly happens. And so I think like because it's so complicated and there's so many steps to do it, it's one, if you have the wrong tool or it doesn't make updates the way you want to make it, it's just gonna get messy really fast. And coming back from that, from an employee trust perspective, I just feels like really hard.
I think that plays into the biggest struggle we have with HR tech. There's some great tech out there that on this side of the table is great. It does the compliance, it has the guardrails. That's all great. If your employees hate it, won't go into it, don't know how to use it, it's not an easy lift, that's not helpful and that's not good tech in my opinion, because I can build you the prettiest system in the world to find your paycheck, find your answers, find all that. If you're still slacking me every day because you hate the system, why am I spending money on that when I probably have it in a PDF somewhere or could just tell you the answer? And I think that's really where HR tech struggles is you have two audiences you have to make happy and you have to make them both happy or it's not an investment worth making.
Yeah, making everyone happy is like so hard. Also should not be our jobs, but it inevitably always comes down to that. And I want to get to more questions because I feel like Q&A is going to be spicy for this event. Um, I have to talk about this because I've inherited so many tech stacks that would make everyone's skin crawl on this call. So how do you decide, or when do you decide if it's worth duct taping a system versus starting over entirely? And to be clear, I've never been given the option to start over entirely, so that is a very optimistic question.
Anytime I have needed to overhaul a system and create the opportunity, which you very much deserve, Heba, is time is currency. How you spend your time is how much do you make an hour? What are your commitments? All of that. Everyone outside of our space loves ROI and data. And aside from Ken, none of us are good at talking about it. But if you can say, it is costing me this many billable hours to do this task. And if we spend X dollars on this system, it's now going to cost me 1/10 of that, or none of that, or this, or it's going to lower our risk for compliance and stuff. That is usually when you know you need to make the change. Because if you could actively sit there and be like, I make $10 an hour and that just cost me $150.
Yeah.
It's you have to put that data on it where I think that's where HR people really haven't in the past been able to advocate for things because it's, well, what's the ROI? What's this? And if you're talking about employee engagement, employee happiness, we're just not as far along in having those good data talking points. And that's how I always do it. It's the same analogy you hear about buying back your time. Do you get your laundry sent out? Do you have someone clean your house? Do you take an Uber so you can work or read a book or take some downtime? Buying back your time is something that applies professionally and personally. And with tech, it should be no different. And I too am mean to salespeople, as you know, and I'll be like, how much time are you going to save me?
Yeah.
Why do I need your product? And don't waste my time on this call either.
We're not mean to them, to be clear. We're not bullying the
I sometimes am.
sales.
Sometimes am. Especially if they start with the like, they take like a generic quote from your LinkedIn and pull it out of context. Or like for us, we talk about Quiet Fridays at Blackthorn. If you're emailing me on a Friday, I'm like, you clearly don't know anything about me and you're not really into what I'm doing. So bye.
Wow. Someone in the chat said, you got to be a little mean. Okay, fine. You
I could probably be a little less mean. Like I should take some and like hand it out to the 3 other co-panelists. And then we could
I
just
will be a
be like a
little more
good.
mean. Ken, I'm curious if you have really good data on this, not to put you on the spot, but like, do you have any data around like the ROI of wasted time and like multiple, just like being in multiple systems and doing things incorrectly sometimes?
Yeah, there's actually research looking at people's time waste when they are floating around between systems. And so like just literally the moving between systems costs big, big money and time because you have to not only switch windows, you have to switch mindsets. And so you're just more prone to errors when you're doing those sorts of flips and wasting time for both yourself and everyone who's waiting on you. And so I think you're absolutely right. Time is a huge issue when you're thinking about whether or not to duct tape or reset. I think also if you can come up with a solution that's just settled and is like, we put it in, it's duct tape, I don't need to think about it. That's very different than something that's fraying every 5 minutes and you have to go back and re-duct tape it. And pulling information out of a system and sticking it into another system to stick it back into another system, I think is where we lose all the time and energy.
Yeah. I just can always count on you to give me good data. You're gonna always cat on you, Ken. So like I know Ken knows about this. The context shifting from system to system is truly the most exhausting piece. Or like for me, when my CEO is like, "Hey, can you get me this answer really fast?" Sometimes I have to tell him like, "No, I cannot get you this answer really fast because I have to go find it from 3 different systems before I can actually tell you the thing." And I think that also anecdotally is like the time thing, Ryan May, that you said is so relevant in the conversation, like the context shifting, but also the time and then like the trust. I always come back to that. But Paula, anything you'd want to add?
Yeah, I mean, we've covered like the ROI, and it is always hard to quantify these things sometimes, but I think there's also a huge opportunity cost. We have a finite number of hours in the day, and do you really want me spending my time on, chasing numbers or like fixing duct taping things together? Or can I be better helping with the business strategy and driving progress in the business? So I think in HR, we're pulled in a lot of directions a lot of the time. And the hidden cost of all those hours is also, aside from the dollar value, there is that opportunity cost of how we cannot drive impact in other areas. And I'd much rather spend my time in those areas doing that than trying to duct tape or piecemeal things together.
Yeah, it's just not worth it in the end to me. Um, This is my never ending question. I feel like I always sneak some sort of question like this into HR therapy, but I think it's just so important. Like, how do you get leadership on board with replacing legacy tools that everyone is like, I just tolerate it. It works. It's not broken, so why fix it? I hate that phrase. How do you get leaders on board with doing this?
Here, I would really lean into dealing with making it their pain and not your pain. So, like, coming and saying, like, this is costing me time. Well, I'm paying you for that time. So, why do I, the leader, care unless you're going to take a pay cut in order to give me back that time? And so I think you really need to emphasize ways in which it hits them. So, for example, with the payroll that we were talking about, I believe EY did a study that said it costs about $291 per error and about an average of 15 errors per pay cycle. And so it quickly flips it from this is a pain point for me, the HR person, to this is a pain point for you, the company, because it's hitting your dollars.
Yeah. That stat had Ryan May and I's jaw on the floor. We both were like,
I was like, wait, I need to write that down. I think with the pain points, especially for those of us in kind of a startup environment, you always talk about what are we doing for our customers? User experience, ease of use, easy implementation. And I've learned from a lot of amazing leaders in safe space, when you flip this back to leadership, the question of like, so we want that for our customers, why do we want that for ourselves? Everybody gets kind of uncomfortable, but it's a really probing question of like, would you give this to our customers? Then if the answer is no, then maybe we should consider the change I'm proposing. I think having that like relatability is something that is really important because people are not they're just not going to understand like it's a compliance thing, it's this, it's that, it's they're not filing their taxes, it's the $291 error. Unless you're finance the CEO, that $291 sounds scary, but are you genuinely like making a connection with it?
yeah. That's such a good point. So I do think a lot of times people are like, our customers, our customers, our customers, and they forget like employees to a certain extent are also customers. They're customers of the company. They're experiencing all the things, all the pain, all the time. And like there's nothing more painful than watching an employee be like, I cannot log into one more system. Like I do not want to do this one more time. Or my favorite, when they ask you no less than 6 times, where do they find their pay stub? And it's like it's in the same tool it's always been in. Why do you need to ask me 6 times where it
I'm
is?
gonna do an off non-paid plug here. This is part of why we love Bob. We have the Bob emoji in Slack now. So if somebody is like, where is this? I'm literally like :Bob : and that's my only response because they know like but if they come to me and say like, hey, I looked in Bob, I couldn't find it, then I'm a little more inclined. But like we've really made that our brand because it is easy to use. And I'm not being paid to say that. I genuinely like love that tool for that reason.
I would love a way to do that. Instead, I'm just like, let me tell you where it is for the 6th time.
Maybe you should record a Loom and just have the link ready.
Actually, my new favorite tactic is on our all hands when I have to do an update. I'll tell everybody, like, hey, I'm going to tell you this update now. Please, please, please do not make me have to remind you 3 times. If I do have to remind you 3 times, I'm going to be pretty disappointed. And like then my employees actually do everything. Like everybody did their open enrollment on time, and that was like unheard of for us. And it was because I got on our all hands and I was like, this is my Olympics. Like we're going through it. I need all of you on board with me. You need to just click an email and do the thing I'm telling you to do. And everyone liked it. Paula, anything to add about getting leadership on board?
Yeah, I think two things come to mind. One, I think we have to paint the picture. I think when I hear the word tolerate, people don't know what they don't know. And so we can't expect them to read minds or to know all the possibilities that are out there. We really have to paint that picture for them and help them feel part of the journey. I think the more you can involve people in the selection process where you can, it makes sense to get their feedback. And there's times where we've been sourcing things and I have like kind of my pet favorite for like really HR based reasons. And, either a manager or a member of the leadership team has a different point of view. That just brings to light a different framework for evaluating the tool. And it also involves them in the process early on. So they feel like they had a say. I think that goes back to like the adoption when you involve people and bring them along. They feel like it's their tool too, not like the tool that you chose and like now you're trying to force them into using.
Yeah. I love storytelling. It's like the most important thing. Also, so many people know nothing about HR. Like so many people don't understand that when we operate in multiple states, there are like different laws that like when someone's last paycheck, like it is always eye-opening for me when I explain it to someone and they're like, "Wait a minute. So we're in like 23 states. You all have to like know that about the 23 states we're in?" And I'm like, yeah, we have to know that, or we have to have a tool that can do these things for us without us worrying about paying people correctly and doing the right compliance thing and deducting the right things that we're supposed to do. But like it's always lost on people. They just like see their pay at the end and they're like, this is my pay. Or like they go through an experience and they just see this end thing and they forget all the things that we do to like get there. So I do love that, Paula, is like storytelling can really unlock people to understand this is so much deeper than they think is like filling out a review or submitting payroll.
And I would also add like that story needs to not just talk about value delivered, but problems avoided in as concrete a way as possible. So like so much of HR is about protecting the organization from something happening, and that makes it really invisible. And so if you can go in and say like, if we had made X number of errors this month, more than the average, it would have cost us this. Like this is what the legal penalties of failing to know that would look like. So if you don't lean into helping us, you're just setting yourselves up for these things to hit you later.
For sure. Okay, well, now that we've all covered my leadership question, I feel really seen by the chat because everybody's like, yeah, we have to tell them to do this. And I'm like, so I'm not alone. So it's not just me getting really mad at people sometimes. So thank you, chat, for making me feel seen and loved. So I also have to ask this question because I have been in this position far too many times, more than I'm willing to admit. Have you ever replaced a tool and regretted it or wished you had done it sooner? And what really tipped the scale?
Yes, on both. Brought in an HR system at my last company. I'm not going to name names, but it was very obvious there was a lot of compliance errors. There was a lot of struggle on the admin side, which in itself is frustrating, regret, instant, like it was oversold. The really kind of tipping point with that one was there was a loss of the human element. A mistake was made. It was pretty devastating to an employee. It was very drastic. And I was working with the vendor, like, hey, we have to make this right. Like, this is a living, breathing human being. And there just was no awareness. And I think most HR leaders are very like, we do this for the people. We know it's not just like, oh, employee number. It's like, hey, that's so and so. They have a family. They have this. They're interested in that. So when you can't translate that, like, even if you tell the best story, the most compelling story, like we were just talking about, and your vendor's like, whatever, that doesn't work. On the flip side now, I think the struggle a lot of us are seeing is we've all gone international, which is newer in the last maybe since COVID for smaller orgs.
Yeah.
And having a tool that kind of is ahead of you in the curve on that has been a game changer. That was actually why we swapped to Bob. I know Amanda's in the chat. She used to work with me at Blackthorn. And it sounds crazy, but we were like, this seems great. This seems great. And what sold us moving from Bamboo was they had every country's holiday calendar, where before Amanda was having to like go to every country, Google the bank holidays, put them in Bamboo. They were not usually correct. The people in those countries were like, what is your problem? We don't have to do that anymore with our system. And that was like, it was such a small thing, but it was just, again, a human experience. Like they're correct, they're labeled, the language there. If you have the asterisks and the non-common to English characters, because we don't all speak English, those little things matter. And in addition to moving to that system, that made it so much more inclusive and so much more like, again, on that human side. All of the stuff my systems do on the back end for me work for me now great. And it's beautiful and I'm excited and very blessed by it. But knowing my employees have that too was really kind of a tipping point.
Yeah. I love that you don't regret you had two stories, because I feel like mostly I regret the choices I make when it comes to HR.
Oh, I definitely have more regret, but I wasn't going to be like, here, let me just hijack the rest of this to tell you all of the pain and suffering from HR tech.
I could probably spend a whole hour just live ranting straight, like no breath, about all the regrets I've made while selecting HR tech. And I think one of the biggest ones for me was asking the team, does it do this? Them saying yes, and then me never verifying that yes, agreeing to pick the tool, and then getting into the tool and it actually not doing the thing I needed it to do. And I was like,
The
wait,
oversell.
yeah, I was like, wait a minute. I made that mistake very early on when I was picking HR tech. Now I almost always ask for a sandbox. And I think like they tend to be like, why do you need a sandbox? I'm like, because I don't know if what you're clicking in the demo is real and you've built it, because I've worked in tech long enough to know you could just show me wireframes. You could just show me wireframes of you clicking things and it's giving you static screens and things aren't really happening. So on demos, a lot of times I will ask specifically for like sales engineers, not just sellers. And I will be like, okay, if you click this, what happens? If I do this, like, I want you to actually show me this workflow. And that's how I've regretted HR less.
I also will say if you ask for referrals outside of the sales process, I know we're not supposed to back channel. Safe Space is a great spot. Have you worked with these vendors? What are your experiences?
Yeah.
And I always try to include like, have you left this vendor and if why?
Yeah. At least once a week, somebody asks a vendor question in Safe Space. So I feel like that's like my first place I go. And I think I'm going to pick a new tech, because it's not just what I think. I also want to know what my peers went through. And a lot of times, like Ryan May and I will talk about tech we love and tech we hate. Like it's in the private DMs, but like we're talking about it because we've like been through it and we don't want the other person to end up stuck with a solution that they don't want. So I would say like leveraging your network too is like really powerful here. Paula or Ken?
Yeah. I was going to say like, definitely leverage your network, because that's, they're going to give you the real, you know, all the ins and outs. Nothing is perfect. There's always, no matter what system, even if thankfully I've not had very many regrets, moving into systems, but I think part of that is because it says, would you have done it sooner? Sometimes it is slowing down and taking the time to really understand what the pain points are. It's tempting when you're frustrated to just be like, I want to move to something else, but do the diligence and take the time. Make sure all your homework is done so you understand that you're getting a solution that's solving the problem that you're looking to solve. I think especially with tech, you know, more and more like we can chase the shiny tool or what's like cool at the trade show, or conference any given year. So it's, you know, every company is different, and really understanding what your company, what the needs are, what the culture of the company is. I did consulting for a while, and like, you know, certain companies wanted a look of a platform, and that was really important to them. Other companies, that's maybe not so important. So you really need to know your user, and make sure you do your homework. I think it's always better to take time because it's a very heavy lift. If you've done it before, you know, the big work comes, you know, after you make the decision and all the implementation in that. And I think that's definitely an important thing to understand, as well as you're evaluating to make sure you don't regret it, is understand what that implementation is going to look like. Does your team have the resources to do that? How is the vendor helping you with that implementation? Because you don't want to be like out there on an island stranded, trying to figure out how to get your data from like one system into another.
My worst nightmare. Actually, my living hell is data in multiple systems.
I
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ken.
I would also suggest thinking about making sure that it actually does everything that your current system does, so you don't suddenly find that you lost a functionality, as well as thinking about what's what's going to be your next problem that you're going to have time to pay attention to, because you don't want to like solve today and then discover, oh, now I have to get something else because immediately that revealed a new problem.
Yeah. That's the other thing too, like tech is moving so rapidly. I feel like we're gonna bring this is gonna come up. Tech is moving so rapidly right now that I do think like the work is on like a precipice where things can really change in the next 1 to 5 years, where work will look dramatically different potentially. And so as you're picking tech or choosing a system, I always think like try to model out what your org could look like in 1 year or 2 years and what their needs are going to be then, because the needs are different at different sizes. Like 50 versus 100, maybe not so much, but 50 versus 150, 200, that's a very different org where like you might not know every single person where they exist in every single state, and things start to look a lot more complicated. So I think we'll get to AI in probably a second, but if you could rebuild your tech stack from scratch, my fantasy, tomorrow, what would be your non-negotiables?
Well, I just recently, or I say in the last year, did this. So I think part of the conversation, and of course, AI, here we come, can't get
Yeah.
out of it. Um, I think what we're all looking at now in terms of technology is so different than even like 2, 3 years ago. So, I'm with the way a lot of the platforms for HR tech are built, some of them, the architecture, and I'm not a tech person, but I know enough to know, some of them, the architecture is self-limiting in what that product can actually evolve to. So, from anything as simple as getting help in the platform. Uh,
Mm,
a lot I've seen, thankfully I'm not in one right now, but I've seen, some of the technology struggle there where, AI could easily be embedded to help you find information in the product. But because of the architecture, it's not lending itself to that. So I can't underemphasize enough that, as HR professionals, we need to know enough about the technology, and what we as that how is that product and vendor going to evolve over the next 2 to 3 years plus, because if they're already behind, they're going to continually fall behind. And just with the versatility as well, I'll just say one more thing. I think, we used to make decisions about things like, how do you manage performance to fit it into a platform. So a lot of times your employee philosophy or culture, you are making trade-offs to be able to execute something in a particular platform. I think now as we evolve and we're really looking to approach performance in more modern ways with more modern approaches, I don't want to be constrained to a system that is forcing me to do it a way that's kind of antiquated. So I think looking for how your tech actually is very flexible and versatile to grow in the direction that you want to grow your culture and your employee experience is really like what's next, or where it's at and what's next. And I think we've typically spent a lot of our time fitting square pegs into round holes, and really limiting our thinking about how we do things just based on the way the technology infrastructure works.
yeah, like I have to do it this way, which
Yeah.
is so annoying. Like when people are like, why do we do it this way? And my only response is, well, we have to do it this way because that's how the system does it. It's so frustrating. And then it's like, it almost feels like so inflexible to the point where like then anyone's like, why do I even bother giving feedback to you if like you can't
Mhm.
even do something differently? Yeah.
On the AI piece, I think something that's really important. I am a little more on the AI skeptical side than some in this space right now. I am the first to be like, what's your AI ethics use? How do I know it's not accessing stuff that is not? I think that that doesn't get talked about enough. And we've had issues where other people have brought in tech from different functions and they're like, it can plug into Bob. And I'm like, and it never will. I'm so glad it can. It's not going to because I know nothing about it. And there's stuff in there that's like not for your eyes or your AI bot's eyes. And I think asking those questions are important. And really, when you're talking to tech, presenting what you're trying to solve. Because like our big thing is we want everyone to have the same employee experience, no matter if you're getting paid from Oyster or USPEO or whatever that is. And I had joked earlier, like I'm mean to salespeople, and I think it's taken mean when they're like, well, it does it for like 80% of it, and they're shocked when, well, then it doesn't work for me. Maybe I need to be a little nice when I approach that. But if I've spent 10 minutes explaining, like, we want it to be the same, we want it to be fluid, we don't care where you live, this is what it looks like. And you're like, yeah, it's great. But I always go back to like, those aren't employee numbers. Those are names. I know them. I speak with them. They're human. So it's not worth my time to invest in the conversation longer if you're covering 80% of what I want, unless there's not something that's going to do more than 80%. In that case, I can't be unreasonable and be like, I want the tool that does 100%. But I think that being very firm in what is the problem we're solving. And if you can't solve that in a way that helps me, that's just more work at the end of the day.
That's your non-negotiable. Yeah. Like if it can't solve my problem, why am I going to use your tool?
And I love how you're just saying being assertive, because you're not here to make the salesperson happy. Like, you have to do that for all the people at your company. They're here to make you happy. And like, you have every right to demand that they do that.
Oh, I don't right.
Oh, I know you do. Other people like hear, oh, I'm being mean, and I'm just like, you're not being mean. You're like fighting for your people by saying, no, you're going to show me that that thing actually does the thing you said it did.
Yeah. I'm having a existential crisis over here because in the chat it says, Rachel said, wait, some vendors make you pay for support, and I've never had to pay for support. And so now other people are talking about how if a tech vendor makes you pay for support, that's a non-negotiable. Or
you should run.
Yeah.
And if you come to me and say your small business solution is a $65,000 implementation fee, please don't be offended when I laugh with my whole soul.
No, that's fair. My non-negotiable, I think lately has been like any sort of AI functionality. So Ryan May, I think if this is the spectrum of like AI, like absolutely will not touch it ever. And this is like, I don't even know what this is. We'll use it for therapy because that is a common, actually one of the most use cases that people are.
Please don't do that, by the way.
No, it actually it's very serious and very it alarms me at the rate that people are hallucinating because of talking to AI therapy. It's a very serious conversation that I've had. It's not something I would do, and I would encourage everyone to go listen to the episode of The Daily from last week where they talked about this. But I probably think I'm like somewhere probably closer to the middle, meaning like I just want automation within the tool I am using. So if I pick a vendor, I want to know the thing that takes me 50 steps potentially could be automated and like with AI somehow. Either like I don't have to make my performance review process from scratch every time, or the comms template automatically generates from like comms we have fed it. Anything like that, I think would be really great. Like that is becoming a non-negotiable for me because I'm seeing a lot of the task work in HR taking up more and more of time rather than time I could be spent thinking about like the bigger organization and what it needs to be, what I need to do to make it better. So I think like that is a real non-negotiable for me at this point. And if the API access is shut down entirely and I won't be able to integrate other tools, I also think that's like a red flag for me. So those are my two
That's super fair. And the AI piece of that is super important on like where are the ethics and where is it assisting you making it it's a hinder, not a helper.
Yes. I love that we're now also talking about open enrollment. Okay. We're almost getting to live questions. I need to make sure we have enough time for them. What's one lesson you learned about implementing new systems that you wish you had known earlier? Mine's going to be from today. I didn't know people pay for support. That's
mine is always I take the adage of under promise, over deliver. If we tell you you're rolling out a system in 8 weeks, our game plan is probably 4 to 6, but I'm always going to build in time for unexpected errors. I'm going to build in time for someone is sick. I'm also going to super undersell what the tool can do, because even if I've had a sandbox, I've vetted it. I know when I feel like I'm like the Bob spokesperson and it's not intentional. It was a big haul for us. We undersold it so much, and I've said in reference calls before, I think we had like maybe 40% of all the functionality turned on when we rolled out. And we've organically rolled out more, but we didn't want to overwhelm everyone because it's like, oh, we have a new system and we have to redo all this, and that's a pain. And then on the flip side being like, and it does all this cool stuff, and then you find out it doesn't do it great, so nobody's impressed. Yeah. So I think like really taking an organic approach of like, okay, this is a slow burn. Let's be there. It also gives you, as the person doing this lift, a little bit of grace and breathing room, because if you've made these wild promises to leaders, they're going to hold you to them. And nobody needs to die by their own sword. And sometimes you need to have 5 minutes to stand back and be like, that implementation was really hard. And I need to like go send Heba a 45-minute voice note about how unhinged I am right now, and maybe get a coffee and then come back to it. And if I've promised to do this in 2 weeks, it's not going to happen.
I like that. I like the under promise, over deliver. That's like a great tactic.
That is a good one. I'm going to add something kind of with a different take. I think, it's important to know, start at the end. If you need to get out of the system you're moving into, how are you getting your data out of that system? I recently ran into a scenario where I inherited a system. And again, given the way the system architecture was, there were a lot of limitations on getting things as simple as like signed documents out of the system. So I think it's really important when you're it's your data in the system. You need to know how that is owned and handled if you need to exit. So that would be my tip there. And that way you can be clear on any kind of backups or things like that you need to do. It wound up being like a super heavy exit. We were super happy with what we were moving into, but getting out of that system, literally taking screenshots of, people's pay history increases, handbooks that were signed off inside of the system, being exported without signature. So I mean, we dealt with it, but I would say that was my lesson learned from that system. And I will always carry that forward as I move into new systems, is understanding how do I get my data out if I need to when I leave.
Of that. I also had that experience with the system I left like a couple of years ago, and they were like, well, why would you want this? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, this is my employee history. Like, of course I want this. It was like a performance review system. And I ended up having to download each person's individual performance reviews over the course of 3 years. It was real fun for me. I learned a lesson, Paula. So I love that is the lesson that you're giving, because now I also ask, like, hey, say in a year we decide to roll off, like, how can I get this data?
Yeah, it's all the things you learn the hard way, right? That then you're like, add that to the list, not doing that again.
I have to say something that I learned from finance, which is interesting because, the finance HR relationship is not without controversy. We have a system we consider our North Star data set. And we literally are like, okay, if it says it in this system, but not in this system, where do we defer to? And we always revert back to that one. And it is the one we have the most control over. We only allow read-only access back and forth from that, because then I can go to people and say, if it's not right in there and it says that in your system, my system's right and yours is wrong. And like, that's the end of it. And it's been very helpful for cross-functional collaboration as well. Because like, well, it says this here. I'm like, I'm not even in that system, and I would be the one to make those changes. And it's not in my system. So, hey.
Yeah. Love that. I mean, I've learned so many lessons over these years that I just feel like an old crotchety person every time I like buy tech, because I'm always like, oh, buckle up. Because I don't know, I just feel like I've learned so many, and that is a good one. But the other one I will add, I will just add my one lesson is, if they tell you it does it, but they don't show you, it probably doesn't actually do it. That is all I will say on that. And also, if you have to ask them if it does this thing and the sales response is, well, why do you want to do that thing? Then they actually don't understand HR either. Those are my two biggest lessons. I asked for, can I ask a private question in performance reviews? And I think my salesperson was like, well, why would you want to do that? And I said, well, there are some questions I want to ask my managers so they can answer and flag things for me that doesn't get shared with their direct reports. That's why I want to ask that. So those are my two biggest lessons. Ken, anything to add?
I think also think about where your data is going and will it still make sense when it arrives there. So in the implementations I've helped coach through, a lot of times they could be in and out, but then it was a question of, does it translate into the new system? Do I have to change Likert scales? Do I have to structure the dates differently? All those little details also matter when you're having that conversation, because you think you're talking about the same thing, and then you realize like, oh, you coded that differently. That's not going to translate straight.
Yeah.
How do I make this still hold true?
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, we're getting really good. Formats and translation, someone said in the chat. Okay, we have to get to live questions. I'm so messed up on my time. I have no concept of time. You can submit them in the live Q&A, and what we are going to do right now is answer your live Q&A questions. Also, you can upvote them. I say this all the time. I have one question in here right now. Okay, my first question is, what Laura, I know Laura, and I love that she's asking this question. What does your tool vetting process look like? Have you found or developed a process, rubric, whatever that you feel brings you to the tool that actually works once the sales process is over? Because really, sales is a whole other experience. I love that.
Uh,
I have a very intense process, so somebody else should go before me.
I may also. I think I'll try to make it less intense, but a quality answer. I think you definitely want to understand the pain points of your current system and what's not working. If you're involving, which I highly suggest, other people in the process, align on that same rubric, because again, people will get easily distracted on like one thing that they do, like let's maybe say finance or a hiring manager, or sorry, a manager who is only maybe going in there to make employee changes and performance reviews. So be very clear on what those measures are and what feedback you're getting from other people. And, you know, make note of the nice to haves, but don't get distracted by them. So I think for me, it's always really making sure it solves what you're looking for it to solve. And then if it has extras, that's great, but don't let those shiny things kind of distract you from your decision.
Yeah.
One type, Paul. Oh,
yeah. No, you go ahead.
I would say plus one to everything, Paul, is that something that I think that is important is the cross functionality of anytime we're vetting a new tool, I will send to our managers, what are your non-negotiables? And I will follow up. I will do my 3-touch. And if we go through the process and a team doesn't respond, and then we implement this new system, like, what doesn't do this? And I have to have that. I will reference, be like, but it's not a non-negotiable because it's not on the list. If it's a business case, like, let's talk through that. But I also very much, something Ken said earlier that really stuck with me is like, we're saying the same thing in a different language. If I don't think a person selling me tech understands what I'm saying, I will ask them to repeat what I am saying back to me. Tell me what problem I'm solving. And I think that's step one. And then when you're going to the next level of like, hey, we want to move to this tech, you have to get leadership buy-in, finance approval, whatever. Give them no more than 3 options. If I've tested 25 tools, they're never going to need to know that, because there's going to be one guy on built-in that talked about this founder that your CEO is going to be like, that's the one. I know nothing about the product. That's the guy or girl or whoever they identify as. But like, there's going to be this unicorn story and it's not going to be something you want. And you have to be like, I did the heavy lifting. I did 25 tools. You're too busy for that. Here's the 3. Here's the pro-con list. They all meet our non-negotiables. Here's the financial side of it. Let me know if you have any more questions. Really package it up. And once you get kind of well-versed in that with your non-negotiables and stuff, it's kind of easy to polish the one you really want. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to win that, as long as there's not something you've missed. And if there is something you've missed, it opens the conversation of like, why did I miss that? Do we need to reevaluate on a different level?
Yeah, that's a really good tip. All plus on all that, I will add, I always write a memo when I'm changing systems. I always write a memo as to like what the current state is and what my problems that we are experiencing are, so that I go into every sales call with like clear eyes as to what problems I'm anchored to, what problems I'm trying to solve. And I also share that memo with executives so they understand what I'm vetting tools against. And the thing I do that's a little bit kooky, I don't think a lot of people do this, is I actually write user stories for 3 groups, because I started my career in tech. I write product like user stories for the HR person, for the manager, and for leadership. And basically a user story is like, as a manager, I need to be able to do this. As a manager, I want to see X. And so I tend to write those use cases, user stories out for every audience, so that I also remember it's not just a system for me. It's a system the employees are also experiencing. It's a system the managers are also experiencing. And it's a system our leaders are also experiencing. And I go into sales basically using my user stories as like check marks. So I'll be like, can the employee do this? Can the managers do that? Can I configure executive visibility to this? And once I sign off on my user stories, I'm good to go. I also do what Paula said, nice to have and need to have, because there's so many shiny objects out there that will distract me. So I always try to go with like 5 need to haves, 5 nice to haves, and then it's just an added bonus when it also does the thing. I feel like we all need to come back and do like a whole HR therapy on our tool vetting process, because that's like a master class I feel like we just taught. This question I love. When do you choose an all-in-one solution versus problem-specific tools? An example was performance management in an HRIS versus like culture and 15.5, etc.
So when I think about this, I really look for all-in-one tools to be able to pull information together at a generic level. So when you need a baseline on a whole bunch of things all at once, you really want to lean into the all-in-one tool because it allows you to get enough of everything to cover the bases. You lean into the more problem specific tools when you have a really clear use case for something unique that they offer that is necessary to doing something. I think one of the mistakes a lot of organizations make is they get the top of the line best thing and then use 10% of its power. And so really thinking about like, if we got this better option that's really detailed and unique, are we going to use those features? If the answer is no, you're probably better off making the most of the all-in-one, which will serve you on a great many different levels.
Yeah.
I am of the belief that not a lot of systems that are all in one actually are good at all of it. So I think, like Ken said, if you're like, hey, we need to do all this in one system and our financial constraints, okay, which one does all of it okay is probably a decent metric in that spot.
Yeah.
But really vetting your system to, again, what are you solving? What are your pain points? And being candid. I said, like, when we were implementing Bob, I was like, we're turning on like 40% of this because this is just too much right now. They did the legwork. Their customer team was like, hey, we have these new things. We want you to try it. And we've gradually gotten there. And it wasn't an upsell. It was already stuff we were paying for, but they met us where we were at. And I think that's something that we forget to do with systems is where are we meeting people where they're at? And I wrote down employee use case because I'm definitely like, that's going to be the new user story because that's the one that I feel like gets overlooked the most.
Love that.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything to add. I think you all answered exactly what I would have said there.
Same. This next one's really interesting. What if I know what I want the tool to do, but I don't know if it exists? Besides searching for dozens of tools to see if it does this one particular thing.
Put out an RFI. Like, there's nothing better than making other people do the work of coming to you to answer your question, as opposed to you going out and hunting it down. Half the time, you can even get suggestions of like, that may be what you want it to do, but actually, there's a different way of doing it that's going to get you where you want to be, that's more accessible. Let them make those arguments.
Love that. Sorry, I'm trying to get to more questions before we get done. Outside of the buy back your time discussion you already had, how do you quantify the sunk risks of proficiency/knowledge loss when you have several systems and it's not well documented and then the employee leaves?
I am team everyone should operate in their role as if they're going to get hit by a bus tomorrow. We have a document at Blackthorn called in case of RM going missing. And it is, you can run my function, probably not well, but all of the major boxes will be checked until you can get an HR professional in there. And I think everyone should have that approach. We're all the hero in our own story. Most situations, while replaceable, and getting employees in that situation and framing it of like, this isn't because we're trying to get rid of you. This isn't because we're worried you're going to get hit by a bus. This is if someone else leaves, you're not left holding a bunch of untribal knowledge that you don't have figuring it out. It's there for you. And we want to extend that across the board.
Everything should be documented.
Everything should be documented. And it should be in a palatable, easy way. I love Loom videos for that. I love Slack canvases for the basic lifts.
That's a good one. Okay, I have 2 more questions I want to get to, but Paula or Ken, anything to add on that question? I'm going to try to get to these. Okay. Wait. I'm going to try to get to these last 2. Any tips for a team of 1 trying to find and vet new systems? Team of 1. Okay, here's my tip. I have a tip for this. Ask employees if they are at all interested in helping you pick the tech. Employees, once they feel like they have a say in something, they get really excited. And it needs to be someone you trust to be honest with you, but also not be bratty when you don't end up picking the tool they like the most. So I would find an employee and say like, hey, are you interested in sharing feedback about tools we might be picking? Maybe they are. They go on demos with you, and that can be a really helpful sounding board so that they are there to like vet it for the experience they're going to have.
I love that actually. I would also add, G2 is a great resource for just like scouring and finding user feedback, but also lean into your networks. Obviously, there's tons of people here on this very juicy topic of HR tech. We all have a lot of opinions. So I think even like using LinkedIn and your network is really invaluable to help. And then you're not in it alone. You'll get really great suggestions on things to watch out for, things to look out for that you might not think of in isolation.
Yeah. But just a hot tip, like you are never alone. HR people always want to give you their opinion on something. And to be able to talk to another HR person freely about said opinion is one of the most gratifying feelings in this world. So you can definitely find someone to tell you how they feel about any system simply
The
by
hardest part of today has been not naming names about tech that I don't like.
Exactly. Okay, last question, and then I will do my wrap up. How do you first come up with a short list of HR tech to consider? This is good. I'm not gonna lie on this one. I will ask my friends, and any system they say is bad does not end up on the short list.
I think something that's important is there's usually a new shiny everybody's talking about.
Yep.
And I always take those off my short list because I kind of feel like if you're injecting all of this money and 6 months ago, no one had ever heard about you and you really want my business, you're going to have to, again, give me the sandbox, give me referrals that I can talk to, show me real world use cases.
Yeah.
And that comes from, we were one of the first on the West Coast to join with Bob from Transform forever ago because I was like, I don't know who you guys are. That's not going to happen. And the AE we worked with is no longer there. He earned it. He put in blood, sweat, and tears. I miss him every day. He is like one of the greatest humans in the world. But it was very candid, like, kind of feel like you're hiding something with all this fancy marketing stuff there, Bob.
I love that. I will also, there's one thing I had to say, and I just forgot as you were saying that because I was making me laugh so hard internally that you still love this AE so much to the day. I'll move on. I can't remember I'll remember what I'm finally going to say maybe in 3 hours. Paul or Ken, anything to add there?
I would look at what they're saying about the problems you're trying to solve. So are they invested in addressing that issue, or are they just talking, my tech is wonderful, my tech is wonderful? And so I think that reveals to you whether or not they're thinking about what you care about when they're designing their tools.
And thank you, Ken, because you just triggered what it was I was thinking. I was going to say, look at who is on their board of advisors or who they are associating with as well, because you want to know that the people building the tech, they might not all necessarily come from HR, but you want to know that they have a good HR community that they are vetting their ideas for their tech through. That is what I was going to say. Okay. We have to wrap up, which is always my saddest part of the day. We send an after event email where we send you a survey. The next episode of HR Therapy is in October and it is Halloween themed. I'm very excited about it. And some final takeaways. I just want to say thank you to these brilliant panelists who joined us today, Ryan, Paula, and Ken, Ryan May, Paula, and Ken. I deeply appreciate you sharing your wealth of knowledge, your hot tips about HR tech. And then I also have to say thank you to HiBob for sponsoring this lovely event and also just being my friend as we experience the HR tech world together and trying to figure out what it is that makes HR's job a little bit easier every day. So thank you. And thank you for everyone coming and taking time out of your day. Wow, I didn't really need 2 minutes to do that. Look at that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a wrap. And my computer did not shut itself down. So I have one today. For everyone who might have missed that story as you were leaving, I will share it with all of you. My computer was holding me hostage, telling me it was going to force the shutdown at 2:58. It is now 3:30 and I have won. Have you heard that, computer? I have beat the technology. Anyways, Ken, Ryan May, Paula, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This was
Bye, everybody.
See you all soon. Bye.